Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering, discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, so if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it, but if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that good stuff. Joining me once again for our Summer of Star Wars, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
It's a trap!
It's a trap!
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
There you go. We have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
Very excited for today's episode here, boys.
Yep. And rejoining us after missing Empire Strikes Back last week, we have Frank Bazzani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. Happy to be back.
Excellent. Glad to have you back. So yes, today is going to be all about Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, continuing our Summer of Star Wars that we kicked off here in the month of June, and we'll be doing all summer long as we dive into all of the trilogies as well as the other theatrically released Star Wars films in the series. So a little bit of the history lesson here. Of course, this was originally released, closing out the original trilogy on May 25th, 1983. A good solid 3 years between each of those original films. There was 3 years after A New Hope, and 3 years after Empire Strikes Back to get here to Return of the Jedi. And pretty much like 3 years to the week, because they all released basically late May of their respective years. Other releases of the time, we had Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, that came out March 31st of that year, which I pulled in because of our fun little fact about Eric Idle last week's episode. We had Flashdance came out April 11th. We had War Games came out June 3rd. Trading Places came out June 8th. And what Bond movie came out June 10th here, Logan, in 1983?
So this can be like a bit of a trick question because you could try to pull like Never Say Never Again, which is an unofficial Bond movie, but we don't count that. So I would say Octopussy came out in 1983.
It was indeed Octopussy. I don't know when Never Say Never Again
It came out like a few months later in 1983, I think, but it's an unofficial Bond movie, so it doesn't count.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, let me scrolling down real quick to see if I can find it.
Isn't Octopussy the one where he confronts Octopussy and she says, like...
if you just stopped it there, I was going to say probably.
I know.
Yeah, I know, right? I thought that's where he was going with that. She's in the bath,
and so she's like, would you mind getting me something to wear? And he, just hands her a pair of shoes.
No, that I think is... Oh, God. The fact that I can even have an educated guess on this is... That, I think, is a earlier Roger Moore movie.
No, because that was Sean Connery.
If it was Sean Connery, then it definitely wasn't Octopussy.
Who's in Octopussy?
Yeah.
Roger Moore.
Dalton.
Oh.
It was Roger
Okay.
Moore? Okay, yeah.
No, I know this. The scene you're thinking of, I'm pretty sure it's from Man with the Golden Gun, which is Roger Moore.
Well, whatever.
Maybe Sean Connery also did it.
Yeah.
If you want to hear more about us talking about James Bond, there's a That Nerdy Site Show episode that was me and Logan talking all about that is now available out to everybody.
Yeah.
Never Say Never Again was October 7th, so yeah, it came out later that year.
Sure.
With, as we touched on last week, directed by Irvin Kershner. That was him doing, diving from Star Wars into Bond. Also here in 1983, we had Superman 3 came out June 17th, and the very ill-fated Twilight Zone, the movie, came out June 24th. So big busy summer there in 1983. But notably, nobody else was in the month of May. Everybody else was staying away from Star Wars.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It was, it once again was the biggest movie of the year that year. It has a runtime.
That was a great year. By the way, that year is just super good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No problem. Had a runtime of 2 hours and 11 minutes. In the Star Wars timeline, of course, this was, again, after Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, which had come out May 21st, 1980. This came out here on May 25th, 83, and we would not get another mainline Star Wars film until May 19th, 1999, when The Phantom Menace brought them back to the big screen. We would, however, in between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace, get the re-releases of all three films with those minor tweaks that George Lucas started putting in here and there. In particular, this, and we'll talk about it like as we get into the movie. This, I think, of the three original trilogy, is the one I think that suffers the most because of what George Lucas has done with it after the fact, especially this version tying it much more into the prequels and stuff. But yes, we will visit the Phantom Menace next week on this show. The roll call here, director, as we touched on a little bit last week in some of the trivia stuff, is ostensibly Richard Marquand, who is mostly a TV director, had a few films prior to this, as well as a few films after Jedi. And we will talk a little bit more about him and that journey when we get into some of the trivia things. And I'm sure Logan will throw a little bit more at us as fun facts from Empire of Dreams. The writer on this one was much like the last film, Lawrence Kasdan, and George Lucas worked on the screenplay on this one. Who was it that was in there previously? Lee Kennedy, I think. She had passed away.
Yeah.
I think either shortly before Empire released or after or something like that. So when I quoted that she was credited for Shadows of the Empire last week, it was more of like the idea and the characters were credited to her. It was not she was not out there writing video games in the 90s. Anyway, so yes, we've already touched on Lawrence Kasdan and George Lucas, but just as a refresher, some of Kasdan's work, notably his debut was previously, I did not update the doc here, but previously his debut was Empire Strikes Back, and would go on to write The Raiders of the Lost Ark, as well as most recently in the Star Wars verse, Force Awakens and Solo. George Lucas, of course, worked on, all them Star Wars things up through the prequels before selling off to Disney and not being involved directly in the sequel trilogy. Starring, I think pretty much everybody. I think I only have like one new name compared to last week's episode, but once again we have Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford as Han Solo, Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia Organa, Alec Guinness making another one-day cameo in filming for his role as Obi-Wan Kenobi. Anthony Daniels as C-3PO, Kenny Baker as R2-D2, as well as pulling double duty in this film as Poplu the Ewok. Peter Mayhew, of course, is Chewbacca. And then David Prowse and James Earl Jones, once again doing a dual header there as Darth Vader's body and voice. The one new person to the crew here that is actually not, I guess he's kind of still in this one, Sebastian Shaw playing Anakin Skywalker, getting the last scene of Darth Vader's life. But now he's also been replaced by Hayden Christensen in the Force Ghost thing. I did not pull Hayden Christensen in here. Anyway, Sebastian Shaw prior to this had done, I do have two actors. Prior to this, Sebastian Shaw was largely known for his stage work as a prominent member of the Royal Shakespeare Company in merry old England there. You also have Billy D. Williams again coming back as Lando, Frank Oz coming back as Yoda, Ian McDiarmid making his official reveal debut in the Star Wars lore, even though we talked about him last week because he was later added in the remasters and stuff. And then lastly, the other new actor in this one that I pulled in here is Warwick Davis playing Wicket, who would go on to do films like Willow, as well as the Harry Potter series, being Griphook and Professor Flitwick. And then he's also been a whole bunch of miscellaneous characters in other Star Wars films since. He's also in a really, I think a really fun and so much so that I forgot about him until I saw it as IMDb. But he's in a fun episode of Doctor Who, or he plays a fun character in an episode of Doctor Who.
He's also Willow.
Yes, that was what I kicked off in saying, yes.
Oh yeah, no, I heard you. I just wanted to be he's Willow.
He is Willow in Willow. Yes,
he's Willow.
Trivia.
Willow needs some more respect from certain circles, including this one.
I disagree, but also they are getting a Disney Plus show, so maybe they'll get it. Maybe we will visit Willow when the Disney
Is Willow
Plus
on Disney Plus?
I believe so. Yeah.
Oh, we gotta cover that.
I mean, maybe.
Give us
I don't
10
know,
weeks.
Yeah. We'll see how we're feeling about that. The trivia in this week's episode or installment of They Have a Bad Feeling About This, we have Han Solo saying that as he is about to be cooked by Ewoks. We also have, I believe this is the first appearance of it in the trilogy, but Ben Burt introduced or added the Wilhelm scream, which is a long-running Ben Burt inside joke in films, and you hear it all throughout a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the guards falling into the Sarlacc pit has that iconic scream. And now we get into a whole bunch of the Richard Marquand stuff. According to the documentary Empire of Dreams, the story of Star Wars trilogy, Steven Spielberg, who is a lifelong best friend with George Lucas, was Lucas's first choice to direct. And even though Spielberg would have loved to direct a Star Wars movie, he was forced to decline because he is a member of the Directors Guild, and Lucas had dropped guild membership over disagreements in Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, which we spoke about last week. As a result, Lucas hired the relatively unknown and at the time non-union Welsh director Richard Marquand. Lucas was also impressed by Marquand's ability to bring in a movie on time and on budget, a very real concern of Lucas after the budget overruns experienced on The Empire Strikes Back. Additionally, we have George Lucas has admitted to being on set frequently due to director Marquand's relative inexperience with visual effects. Marquand joked, it is rather like trying to direct King Lear with Shakespeare in the next room. Director Richard Marquand alienated several of the actors and actresses, with Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill accusing him of treating them terribly, while simultaneously fawning over Harrison Ford's performance. And according to a magazine interview with Irvin Kershner in May 2004, Kershner states that Richard Marquand didn't direct all of this movie. It was Kershner's assistant director and George Lucas who took over after the actors and actresses didn't respond very well to Marquand. The relationship between Marquand and George Lucas was said to be bad. On the DVD commentary, however, George Lucas claimed he worked quite well with Marquand. At this point, I think I want to interject here. I have, I think, one or two others still. No, just one more with him. But I will point out that in doing like a lot of this research, it's unfortunate because Richard Marquand passed away a few years following the filming of this. So like, it's another one of those cases where we've gotten a lot of other people's perspectives on what really happened. Going back to, I think, what we talked about a couple weeks ago of like the mythology around Star Wars and the making of Star Wars, and the truths and half-truths and what's real, what's not. It seems like he didn't get to tell his side of the story all that much before he ended up passing away. So I think that may color a lot of the like the narrative around this. So I appreciated seeing that little bit about like Lucas claimed they worked fine together on the DVD commentary.
Yeah, but Lucas thinks he works fine with a lot of people, and a lot of people don't think that they worked well with Lucas.
True.
So
I also think that George Lucas, especially because whenever the documentary was filmed in like 2004, I mean, George Lucas has no reason to kind of gloat over a dead man's grave in that scenario, right? Like he's got no reason to say anything bad about Richard. Yeah, at that point,
he's also the kind of person that after a person's passed, he would not talk ill of them.
Yeah,
he's
100%.
like in reality, as much of like as much of a boorish person as he can be, he's very soft spoken, and he's very it's surprising sometimes to find out the things that George Lucas has a deep care for and consideration for.
Yeah.
Like if you ever look up like his history and struggle with dealing with so he was trying to put into like a bunch of low income housing near his ranch, and was like legally stopped by his neighbors from building it. Like if you study like his history of like in race politics and like what he's tried to do for the progressive like movements in America, like you'd be surprised how much he cares about these things, because the understanding that people mostly get from him is that he's kind of a boorish old man. So he's a real wonder of a person in his own right. So, but he's definitely not the kind of person who's going to talk ill of a man, even if he had some like a bad experience with him. He's not going to talk ill of him.
Yeah, and it's
or it's that Lucas thing with like, I thought we worked well together. They
yeah, and it could be just a misinterpretation of it, because I don't necessarily even mean like people are talking negatively about the dead or anything like that. It's just like we hear one side, or like a very particular kind of side of the story about like, well, yeah, he like the guy didn't really know a ton, so Lucas was in there kind of really ghost directing the film and stuff like that. And it's like, well, maybe he would tell a different story if he were still around to tell that story. But anyway, the last little bit of trivia on Richard Marquand there is that the principal photographer was beset with numerous delays and clashes between executive producer George Lucas and director Richard Marquand, with the former wanting to use multiple cameras during each take so he could have more material in the editing room, and the latter wanting only 1 or 2 cameras with no fallback option, which again, I would say features to like why Richard Marquand would have been bringing stuff in under budget, because he's not trying to do a whole bunch of extra coverage that Lucas was. But the filmmakers inadvertently used old film stock that caused many shots to have a bizarre blue tint, which forced Industrial Light and Magic ILM to fix the color timing on many shots in post-production. At a certain point, Lucas essentially took over the majority of directing duties from Marquand. And then this is a follow-up to one of the things we talked about, I think, a little bit extensively last week. In last week's episode. In the 2004 DVD release, George Lucas explained the reason behind why Yoda told Luke that Darth Vader was his father. Lucas had consulted with a child psychologist during the making of the film, and the psychologist said that unless it was unequivocally stated that Vader was Luke's father, moviegoers aged 12 and under would dismiss Vader's claims to be Luke's father as a lie. He decided to go through with this when James Earl Jones stated that he personally didn't believe Vader was telling the truth in Empire Strikes Back, no matter how many explanations he was given. So that again speaks to like, that's why they have to address it so head on in episode 6 here.
And it's only natural that Luke, as an orphan, like being given this revelation, would go to his quote unquote authorities in life to confirm it.
Yeah.
So it'll make sense.
Yeah. Despite how much he might have felt it to be true already from the Force.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's,
you still if you find out Darth Vader's your dad, you need people.
Yeah, and plus he had enough doubt, that was his whole thing in Empire Strikes Back, so he hasn't completely moved on beyond that here in the beginning of Jedi. As I mentioned, Sir Alec Guinness filmed his cameo once again in just one day, although did not have stats on how much bank he made.
How much bank he made? Oh wow, that was weird.
And then lastly, the word Ewok is never said aloud in the movie.
That's a great,
just one of those things we just kind of all know about because of extended canon and stuff like that, and the toys. So yeah, that is what I've pulled in here for the trivia. Yub Nub indeed, which again is a specific direct kind of correlation that I was alluding to, in that like the change of the celebration at the end of this film and not having Yub Nub, like every time I go back and watch this version, I'm like, oh, that's right.
I hate it.
I'm not going to hear Yub Nub. That sucks.
And you get that stupid, weird, like, the Emperor's dead, now the galaxy's free montage at the end.
Yeah.
It's just like absolute garbage.
So how do we think it holds up? Logan, because I know this is your favorite of the series, I will throw it to you first to just gush away. Go nuts, buddy.
Yeah, so it's great. This is gonna be our most contentious of the 3 movies based off Cameron's 5-second speech right there. I love the end of this movie, first off, right? Like, we'll start at the end and we can kind of work backwards, right? Like, I love the end. I have no beef with the extended edition, like, remaster. I don't think the extended special edition feature add-on things have ever bothered me. They don't bother me here either. I actually really like the, like, look at the galaxy being free, right? Like, one of the big things that I've always said about Jedi is the fact that it gives such a good ending to the series, right? Like, especially seeing where the series then goes beyond this, I think this is very clearly the best kind of ending you could have wanted. I think it wraps it up so well. Return of the Jedi to me is a little bit like Uncharted 3, where it's like I really genuinely after watching it and playing it again for the 2, I really don't understand the arguments almost about why people like the second one better, in Empire or Uncharted 2's case. I just think it's a better movie than Empire Strikes Back, right? Like, I just enjoy my time with it more, right? Like, this to me is the movie where I think you really get the sense of Star Wars being a space opera coming like fully into play. I think the final act of the movie is 100% that, right? Like, I think you can like Jabba's palace, you can not like Jabba's palace. Like, that's totally, I think people are going to come out of that sequence and that act with a lot of different thoughts and a lot of different feelings about it. I personally like it. And then you can like or not like the second act, but like I do think that like the last act of Return of the Jedi is like the best 30 minutes or so, 40 minutes of any Star Wars movie. Like, I just think it's like perfect, basically. From like the minute they have the battle on Endor, the battle in the space, and then everything involved with Luke, Vader, and the Emperor in the throne room, I just think is like brilliant. I think the full circle nature of Luke and kind of his journey from, innocent farm boy looking at the twin sons to where his kind of path leads him by the end of Return of the Jedi. I think Vader's kind of redemptive arc. I think Palpatine is a great villain who I'm popping in a lot of pop culture references here today. A little bit like River Song is the best in their first appearance, and then after that, I gradually enjoy less and less and less. And I think that, Han Solo doesn't die, so Harrison Ford didn't get his wish. But I like Han Solo's, his and Leia's relationship by the end of this movie. It also spawned a gazillion, like EU like novels and characters and everything, right? Like, it is arguably one of the most important decisions made was keeping Han alive and having him be with Leia because it spawned so much afterwards. I'm fine with it, right? Like, I just think it's a really fun, enjoyable, great movie that taps into this kind of operatic nature that's always kind of existed around Star Wars and does it in a way where by the end of the movie, you feel totally satisfied. You feel like you've kind of all these characters have earned where they've been. I think all of the knots are kind of tied up loosely, right? And it is, I think, such a great ending for, especially within like the context of, at the time, just this trilogy, but even in the larger series, I think it's a brilliant end for the Star Wars saga.
Mm-hmm. Frank, what do you think?
I really like this movie as well. I really enjoy the entire thing, and I think, like Logan said, it is a really good ending for the entire series. I think Logan hit on a lot of what I like about it, where even from the beginning with the scene in Jabba's palace, like right out the gate, I'm excited. It's kind of like this cool scene of them, like Lando's undercover and then like, or even Leia's undercover too. Like, I like that. It's like it's a different side of that we don't ever really see or even get again, of them doing like a kind of a co-op like mission. Yeah, and like I just think that's super cool, and I like that whole scene and everything they do there, and even to the end when Luke does his thing, when he flips off the end and then catches the lightsaber, and like that's like one of the coolest things. Like, but also, yeah, and then the other part I love about it too is the kind of the ending is the tiered space battle. It is like we're on the ground, we're flying in ships, and we're also doing Death Star stuff, like. And I like that it's like the 3 tiers. And my favorite part of that is like the throne room with Luke and Vader and Palpatine. Yeah. And I love all of that and everything that happens there. But I also even love the idea of it. And the fact that like for everyone else, like Luke is the only one that knows what happened in there. And for everyone else, Luke went in there and then left carrying Vader's body. And now Palpatine is just dead. And I think like, I know that doesn't necessarily get explored in the movie. And I was hoping they'd do more of that in the sequels. But I still think that's like a really amazing, cool idea that like it was the super intimate moment between these 3 crazy powerful characters, but the only people who really know what happened after that is Luke, because everyone else in that room is dead. But that's just another thing I like about it.
Yeah,
Frank, if you really want to see that explored, if you go back, even though they're not technically canon anymore, they're in the legend status. If you want to go back and read some of the EU books that came out post Return of the Jedi, they delve into that.
Oh yeah,
like the whole. Yeah, like the whole thing about like the mythos of So a lot of like Imperial like remnants believe that like Darth Vader was killed by Luke.
Yeah.
And he valiantly tried to protect the Emperor because they couldn't fathom that he would betray the Emperor ever. Like the secret of Vader being their like Luke and Leia's father, Leia having like the like when it's discovered the political fallout for Leia, because at that point people are like you're the child of literally a butcher and executioner of thousands. Like it's great stuff. So those EU books are just a good read if you want to see that explored in any content.
But see, and that sounds fascinating though, because that's why I've always loved the idea, and I would like to see that dived into. And I was hoping they would do that with sequel stuff when they never really did. But it's still kind of a cool moment and a cool thing here. And then the only other thing that I have for it is I've never seen the original version. I've only seen that like remastered version.
Mm-hmm.
So I would almost be curious to see the original version and just kind of see the comparisons. But as a kid, I was very confused by Hayden Christensen at the end of this movie because like I knew this movie was like 20 years earlier.
I mean,
and I was confused. Like
I even remember, so Sebastian Shaw like still has his scene there as Vader at the end. And I remember seeing the original pre Hayden Christensen, and the third ghost shows up at the end, and it was this guy that you don't recognize because he looks nothing like bald dying Vader there at the end. So I was just like, who the heck is that guy? Like what's going on here? Like and I just remember like the first time I watched it just not understanding what was going on there, and like my friend having to explain it to me and be like, no, that's Anakin. That's what he looked like. And so yeah, so for me it is one of those things where it's just like when we get when Hayden Christensen shows up, especially if you're watching it in this order and you've never been exposed to anything else, it's like, how would that even be a familiar face to Luke, let alone like to the audience or anything like that? It's just like, why is this young kid showing up? And sure, it's, well, that's who Anakin was before he became Darth Vader, and so it's like restoring that. But like that is telling a lot of story poorly in like 2 seconds of screen time or something like that. So
yeah. And it's also just an absolute like Sebastian Shaw's only appearance is as that damaged Darth Vader, and to take I personally always felt really upset about that because it's like you're saying like I understand like the kind of like storytelling that Lucas was trying to do there with it, and I get that, especially if you watched it like 1 through 6 in that order, like some people do. Like I understand why you would do that, but it just feels like you're it just feels like there's like a lack of respect for Sebastian Shaw, which considering George Lucas's relationship with the people who have played Vader, it speaks kind of volumes.
Yeah, there was a trivia thing I didn't pull in here, but like there was something in here about like David Prowse didn't know that there was going to be a Vader taking off his helmet scene pretty much until the movie came out. So there was definitely like a feeling of he was slighted by that in favor of this other actor. But yeah, and
then Sebastian Shaw years later also gets slighted.
Yeah.
By having like his non jacked up face scene be like also like Hayden Christensen's
I believe Sebastian Shaw had passed away by that point in time, so he didn't care.
I'm upset on his behalf. Okay,
that's
not really. I doubt like as a professional actor, I'm sure he would have understood on some level, or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he'd be upset. We don't know. He's been dead for years.
He got paid either way.
But he got paid either way. No, and then like Hayden Christensen, like his Force Ghost, like just doesn't really like match. I was watching it on my phone, and I'm like
the best way to watch a Star Wars.
And I was just
listen.
cringing.
This is where I get like this is like I don't have like all the time in the world to just watch these movies. I have other things I got to do, so I watch them when I can. But no, I was watching like the tail end of it on my phone, and like I watched it. I was like, even on this low of a resolution, I can kind of tell like the difference in like ghost quality, you could say, was obvious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so Yeah.
So yeah, Cameron, hit us with your thoughts of how this movie.
My thoughts. So Return of the Jedi used to be my favorite Star Wars movie, and I still love it dearly. I also, however, feel like it is by far the out of the original trilogy, the one movie made way worse by all the edits in the special edition. Whether it's the just like we talked to, like I will say it's not the worst examples of them. I think the worst example is the Brontosaurus dinosaur in Mos Eisley in A New Hope. I think that's the worst version because of how bad the CGI is in that scene. And it's there for such a short time, and it makes it just doesn't work in that scene. I will say that the Max Rebo band extension.
I was gonna say Cy Snoodles is a pretty damn good example of that not feeling like it belongs in this movie.
Not feeling like it belongs. In the original, it feels like Jabba, so in the special edition, it feels like after the special edition edits, it feels like Jabba's like, yeah, I really like that song, play it again. When before it was Jabba was like, I like girls dancing, dance again. And so it made Jabba feel like scummier, which fits. Anyway, but I think that it's the one that suffers the most from special editions. Whether it's that, whether it's the Anakin at the end as a Force ghost, which is, I've already talked about that. I won't get into it again, but I think it also has some of the rougher times with just some odd edits here and there.
Before we get away from special edition changes, I want to, because I share that. In none of these cases does it break the movie for me or anything like that. I just think it is the most egregious cases of making the movie a little bit worse. I don't think any of these changes make the movie better at all. And for me, it is the whole end celebration is they just feel so out of place with the entire rest of the movie, because you've watched this very low tech stuff up to this point, and suddenly you're looking at Theed and Coruscant, and especially if again you're watching it in this order, these are places that have never been seen on screen or never been introduced, and so they just feel well, why is that? You could, and I thought they did in the original versions of it get that galaxy-wide celebration across by everybody coming down together on Ewok. And yes, we're not seeing other places represented and stuff like that, but but the fact that the entire
see Rebel Alliance is there,
Gungans screaming in Theed and celebrating, and in Coruscant you see the people carrying and basically crowd surfing a stormtrooper body. It just it feels weird and just out of place with the rest of this movie, and especially
also,
the practical nature. Those are scenes that fit in fine with prequel stuff, but putting prequel visuals in this just feels off and weird, and
it feels off and weird. But I would also argue that it also doesn't make a lot of logistical sense in a lot of different ways. One, it just, for there to be mass celebrations at the a few hours after the Death Star blows up and the Emperor's dead. Across the galaxy and on every planet,
I'm less concerned about the timing of this happening in real time with the events on, because especially with the Mandalorian has come out now and introduced the idea that the explosion of the second Death Star was broadcast around the galaxy and stuff like that. It was filmed and displayed out in Tatooine and places like that. So and just going off of you guys talking real quick earlier about the what will that political unrest look like, we might end up seeing that in Mandalorian, because that is a series that is exploring kind of this time frame in between sagas. So maybe we will see eventually it comes out that Leia and Luke were related to Vader, and what does that mean to the galaxy who reacts to that. It's gonna be weird, because obviously another 20 years goes by, and by the time we get to Force Awakens, people don't even remember that this whole thing happened or whatever, or the Jedi existed and stuff. So it's Filoni still has some heavy lifting to do, but
he does. I will say that with the way that it treats the Mandalorian treats the Outer Rim like the Wild West. The way that the Imperial Remnant acts out there feels like, has always felt a lot of like when you watch westerns and like the Confederate remnants show up, like Confederate soldiers from like that were like left out west before, like when the fall of the Confederacy happened. So like I look at it like I like that. I hope they do explore that more. I always found that super fascinating. But like, yeah, my feelings about the film though still hold to. So those are my gripes about it, and I'll put those to the side because now I just want to gush about how much I love this movie. From Jabba's palace going forward, I think that it is just a straightforward adventure. From Luke showing up and having like quote unquote completed his like knowing what he needs to know to complete his training, and like coming in, walking in and saying, I am a Jedi Knight. Even though he knows I'm not really a Jedi, I haven't been given that like quote unquote authorization from Yoda yet. Like, and it's like doesn't really matter.
Yeah, he doesn't know that he needs that. It's not until he has that conversation with Yoda later that he like learns that he's not really a Jedi Knight yet. So yeah.
But like when he shows up and he's like using what I love is the moment he walks in and he's hooded, he does everything that we saw in A New Hope that Vader and Obi-Wan did. The Jedi mind trick, a quick force choke to choke out a guard that was trying to stop him. When he walks in the front door, that he lifts himself, like he lifts the door himself, walks in, chokes out a pig guard, meets the Twi'lek guy, does the Jedi mind trick on him, goes up.
Okay, I gotta interrupt. Gamorrean guard and Bib Fortuna. We gotta get those out of the way. Just you're hitting my cackles on my neck, on the back of my neck.
Now you know how I feel sometimes, Trevor. Yeah.
Especially because I know you know the lore.
So, like, yeah, Gamorrean, Bib Fortuna, and, like, the whole thing, and, like, I loved it when he's down there. He doesn't have his lightsaber. He stored that in R2-D2, which is just, like, c'est magnifique. Just such a great thing. But he shows up and it looks like he has no weapon. He takes on a Rancor and like just does it practically and just like totally is in control of everything as it's going on. Constantly telling Jabba.
I would say no, he's not in control. He gets through with the skin of his teeth, but he is having to like figure it out on the fly and stuff. He's not there and just like dispatches the Rancor very handily and whatnot.
No, he doesn't. But what I was trying to say is that like whenever a moment comes and Jabba's like, yeah, you're like, you feel it yet, huh? And he goes, surrender or die, Jabba. Like, he never wavers from the Jabba, either cooperate with me or you will die. He's constantly telling him that as this will eventually happen. This confidence that he has in this film is so good. And he's in that all black suit. And then he does the diving board leap that we've all done on a diving board.
Absolutely.
3 of us are from Arizona, so I know for a fact we've all done that. Logan, I just assumed that you have too.
Oh yeah.
You've jumped 100%. Off the diving board, turned around, grabbed it, and tried to do that same thing. We've all done it. We've all tried. We've all but we know there's a do or do not. There is no try. We've all failed at it.
Oh, I've succeeded.
Because
no, I've never.
You did a flip over?
No, of course not.
Don't lie to me. Don't give me hope.
So before we just dive into like all the moments and stuff, I'll just kind of give my general thoughts. Like it overall, again, I very much enjoy this. It is a wonderful capper to this trilogy of films, and especially watching it after we kind of talked last week about how much more muted Empire got especially in terms of like alien life in the galaxy and stuff, and how it was like, oh, everybody's basically human again. Like the fact that so much of this is getting weird with aliens again, and the whole everything on in Jabba's palace, and then ending on Endor with all the Ewoks and stuff. It is like just cool getting to see like this not be it leans fully into the sci-fi and the craziness of that. I do love that, like, the thing kicks off with this immaculate plan that everybody's put together. The fact that, like, it's been in the works before. We like the fact that we see Lando there already undercover shows that, like, even though we're seeing R2D2 and C3PO show up here, like, pieces have already been put into place before the movie even begins. So, like, we enter the scene in media res, and it's really cool, and it doesn't do that thing where, like, we rewind and go back to see how it began or whatever. And then, like, there's just more and more layers. We see Leia come up in her outfit that we don't know is Leia at the time, and that's a great fun reveal, especially for like
the thermal detonators.
Exactly, yeah, that character, getting to see, like, her, you know, who's already been a badass throughout the rest of the series, but getting her to see in that light right before they just go into super over sexualization and, like, defining the puberty of, you know, teens everywhere for the next 40 years. Like, that's just
but then
wonderful.
She uses that,
and
the way that she uses sexualization as a, well, I'm the person closest to Jabba.
Yeah.
So when everything goes down, I'm going to kill Jabba.
Murder
and then
this man. Yeah.
successfully doing that and just being a total badass while doing it. Jabba's choking out, tongue flailing everywhere.
Yep.
Fucking awesome. Love Leia.
Yeah.
She's the best.
So yeah, like, the fact that we go from that, it is just a great, fun, exciting, adventurous way to start things off, and it gets all of our heroes back together in the way that we want to see them, because they were split apart for so much of the last movie. And even though they're going to be, you know, sent off in their different parts of the mission at the kind of end on Endor and stuff, like, we get them coming back, we get them all working together excellently, and it from Empire Strikes Back ending on a down note, like, this immediately lifts us back up and says, all right, we're in it. Like, there is a chance, they've got hope. And then we see, like, the Death Star, you know, being completed and the Emperor, like it effectively sets up them as a threat too. And you know that something's always, you know, lurking there. You know that, especially once they start kind of revealing that, you know, the Emperor's, like, a step or two ahead of the rebellion on this one. Like, the stakes are high, and everything is fun. But then, yeah, it ends in the, obviously, like, the first one ended, you know, the trench run, great. Second one ends with, like, the dueling planes of action of like, Leia and crew trying to escape, and Luke facing down with Vader. And here we get 3 planes of action, which is pretty much where Lucas should stop. Will he? We'll find out next week. But they do all work so well in concert with one another, that it is, like, we don't spend too much time, you know, with one, like, it keeps the momentum of the third act of this film just constantly at the edge of our seats, and it is very fun in that regard. And then, like, one of my biggest issues with this movie that has since been heightened by both Force Awakens and eventually The Rise of Skywalker is twofold. One, I think the end stakes being, let's blow up another Death Star, is, like, loses a little bit of the magic because of that. Because there is, like, we're retreading territory from the first movie, which then, of course, becomes a joke in and of itself in Force Awakens. And then I especially have an issue with just the redemption of Darth Vader. Much like I will eventually have an issue with the redemption of Kylo Ren, is this character has been a monster to the galaxy. And just because he does, like, one act of goodness for a very selfish reason of, like, saving his own son, does not make him a hero. But Lucas very clearly wants us to see him as a hero, because he ends up as a Force ghost at the end. He ends up coming back to the light side. And that is just too, like, that is too far into the realm of, like, good versus evil for me. Like, that one act of goodness does not undo blowing up Alderaan and murdering younglings that we will eventually see, and like the horrors that character has inflicted on the galaxy is too dark and gruesome to get like a happy ending, and
Well,
he gets a happy ending, like not as happy an ending as he could, kind of
I
thing.
mean,
But
can
like,
we each have thoughts immediately?
I mean, but like he is redeemed in the eyes of his son, and you know, depending on where the lore goes, you know, the greater galaxy, because he killed the emperor or whatever. And it's like, no, that doesn't fly for me. And so that like is I wish Lucas had been comfortable, and it's admittedly a sign of the times and stuff, but like nowadays I think, no, I guess I can't even say nowadays I think, because clearly they were fine to not play in the realm of grays in Rise of Skywalker, but like
yeah.
I wish that was a more murky gray character, and that he didn't get to become a Force ghost at the end, and didn't get to like rejoin the light side in the afterlife and whatever. So those are kind of like my general thoughts on the film. Logan, I will throw to you first, because you and Cam both had a retort.
I know, I know, because you opened up like a huge, yeah. So first off, yeah, I mean, again, I think the movie's great. But like fixating on like the Vader question. So like I've never interpreted the ending as Vader is a hero now, right? Like, so like I've always been like, you know, he is, especially watching these in the context of like before the prequels and even during the prequels, like he's a bad guy who can still have good in him, right? And that's how I've always interpreted the ending. I've ever been like, oh, he's completely redeemed 100% now. He's absolved of his like sins, right? Like that's certainly never been my interpretation of the ending of Return of the Jedi. It's always been he can be a bad guy and also still do good things, and you can be a good guy and do bad things, and every kind of permutation in between of that, right? Like the Force ghost at the end is because they're Force ghosts that were important to Luke, right? And so you have Obi-Wan Kenobi there, who was kind of his teacher in A New Hope. You have Yoda, who was his teacher in Empire Strikes Back, and you have Vader, who kind of taught him his, you know, quote unquote final lesson of the trilogy, right? In terms of to what not to become in a lot of ways, right? To what you can become if you don't watch out, right? Like Luke very purposefully, like there's a whole great Twitter thread on it that I have like saved in my phone, but I can't recall off the top of my head, but about how like it is not an accident that the climax of the entire original trilogy ends with Luke not fighting, right? Like with him not killing someone, with him throwing away his weapon very purposefully, right? And proclaiming that he's a Jedi, right? And it is like that act, right? His kind of sacrificial moment here that redeems his father, right? Like that he throws away and eschews violence that the Jedi have kind of, you know, as we'll see in this prequels, and all of their kind of extended lore around them, the Jedi have kind of been corrupted a little bit, right? They've kind of lost their way a little bit and have kind of embraced the violence in a way that they hadn't prior to, perhaps. And that Luke kind of rejects this and goes back to kind of this idea of, I think, being a true like peacekeeper kind of thing, and pacifist, right? And so I never interpreted Vader killing the Emperor as his kind of now you're here again. I view it as redemptive in terms of redeemed in the eyes of solely Luke. Because like Frank alluded to, no one else is in the room, right? No one else really knows what happened, right? Like Frank actually put it really well. That's actually one of my favorite ways I've heard the ending kind of describe it, with the fact of like, yeah, like 3 people walk in and one person walks out and he's carrying the body of one of the other people. It's pretty sus. And I think the mythology around Luke kind of obviously builds up on that, right? And so like, I don't know, like I think even as a kid, I was always okay with the idea of, you know, Vader is redeemed in Luke's eyes, right? Like his father isn't lost, right? Vader saves Luke and Luke saves Vader. And I think that was always enough for me, right? Because like to me, Vader's redemptive nature is Luke seeing that, you know, obviously Vader's severed hand and his own hand, right? Like that he can become a machine like his dad, and him not wanting to do that, right? That he can become, you know, evil like his father, right? Like Luke ultimately to me becomes this like symbol of good because he embraces and understands that he's only so far away from being the symbol of darkness, right? As obviously shown by the fact that like his clothing in the trilogy gets gradually darker over time, right? By now he's just in this immaculately beautiful all black outfit that looks so good. So yeah, like I never had any issue with the Vader's kind of storyline and conclusion in Jedi.
Before we go to you, Cam, the idea of like 3 men walk in, 1 walks out kind of thing. There was a moment in particular watching it through this time where when Luke turns himself in, and like he and Vader have this whole conversation about like, you know, their lineage and their relationship and whatnot. I started thinking about how fun it would be to do a sketch of the 2 stormtroopers that are there overhearing this entire thing, and then just like walking out and just being like, "So wait, that they're related? That isn't that the guy that blew up the last one of these things?" And they're like that whole like just a fun. I think you could go off and have a fun whole tangent about like the shit that they just heard because they're, you know,
I like
faceless drones or whatever.
How every movie so far tries to come up with a Star Wars related comic sketch to do.
I mean, like that's like I feel like that has to have been something that like Robot Chicken or Family Guy or something like at least pitched, if didn't actually do outright or something. But yeah,
there is a related thing where I don't know if it's independent comedy or if it was like Family Guy or something, but it was basically a guy with the conspiracy theory about the like blowing up Death Star.
I remember
like
that, yeah, there was
the guy, he's the guy's son.
It was like a
the guy who's
dorkly,
in charge of it. It's his
there was a dorkly animated sketch of like them figuring out so the guy's son is the one that just happens to know about the vent. The one fatal flaw of this Death Star just happens to be that guy. And the one guy who's not on the Death Star when it blows up, Vader, yeah, it was an inside job, and they definitely play into that. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's like it's my thought was definitely inspired by those kinds of sketches and stuff, but it was just seeing that and just seeing these 2 characters that we will never see or hear again, but like witnessing this very iconic moment and this very like, you know, impactful moment that has significant ramifications if the larger galaxy knew it, as Frank so eloquently touched on there. Like there were a couple that could have gone and told that story if they got the hell off that thing before it blew up. Anyway, throw it to you, Cam, to rebut my redemptive.
Not necessarily rebut. I'm not going to rebut you on that. I do think that there is a degree you're correct on. I just want to make a couple of clarifications. One, at worst, he's a bystander concerning the destruction of Alderaan. It was Moff Tarkin who ordered for the destruction, and technically, as we established during the first film, Moff Tarkin is an authority figure that somehow has a one-up on Vader. That Vader's doing what Tarkin is saying.
I mean, chain of command, yes, but yes,
like the chain of command, or like even though Vader's technically outside of the chain of command as second only to the Emperor. Somehow there is this level of like authority Tarkin has over Vader. Yeah. To the point where even Leia mocks him, saying, "I see you're the one holding Vader's leash." So bystander effect, not bystander effect. Definitely a child murderer. Mm-hmm. Murdered a room full of like small, like young, small children.
Plus
murdered them.
Indigenous people on Tatooine. You know,
indigenous people on Tatooine. Also,
Yeah.
The women and the children too, yeah.
And the women and the children too.
Anakin Skywalker pre-fall of Darth Vader, war criminal. After the fall to Darth Vader, absolute like child murderer, like the whole thing. It's like there is, I don't like it when people say Vader was ever redeemed, because something I liked that I touched on, Frank. If you want to see that explored more in the expanded universe stuff, that's now legend status in canon. They deal with that. Okay. Sorry, 1 second.
Okay. Cam has been, I believe, interrupted by family members. Anyway, yeah, and to
sorry, my niece walked in and asked if I would do rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Fun.
So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, like I was saying, I don't like the rhetoric that when people say Vader was redeemed, and I don't even think it's so much as he was redeemed in the eyes of his son. I think when you look at the journey Anakin had in becoming Vader, even before we knew what happened in the prequels, even if we just know what we saw when Obi-Wan talks about Vader and talks about like how this is, and what I love is there's a moment where Vader says, "Once upon a time, Obi-Wan believed as you do, that I could be redeemed." Like when Luke is saying like, "You have good in you, you can be redeemed, like you can walk away from this." I've never seen it so much as a redemption, so much as a you're doing bad now because you have always done bad. Like you've been doing bad up to this point because you've fallen, and instead of getting up, you've stayed fallen. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people use like Vader's fall to the dark side as like an allegory towards a lot of different problems, including substance abuse. Mm-hmm. Like you are continually to destroying yourself. You're like in this case using the dark side of the Force. You're destroying your sense of self, your soul, all these things, and I'm just asking you to pull back from that. And that's all Luke is asking him to do. You're like, don't turn me into the Emperor. Like, join me. Like you don't have to keep doing bad just because you've done bad before. Whether that's redemption, whether that's a significant change, it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to ask somebody to do, and it's a harder thing for that person to accept that challenge, to take it up and then follow through with it. And I don't see his choice as a lot of people try to put it in like the cosmic, galactic, karmic sphere of the rule of two, balancing the Force, all that. I just see it as a moment where a man sees that his actions are leading to the torturing and pain of somebody he cares about, and even though he's been telling himself that I don't care about them, I can't betray the Emperor. This entire relationship, but also let's also make it very clear: the Emperor reveals that he was planning on betraying Vader. When he says, "Replace your father at my side," like that's a wait. Excuse me. Like so, there's a lot of like layers of emotions there that make what he does to the Emperor not a selfless or quote unquote redemptive thing. What I feel like it is what he tells Luke. Tell your sister that you were right. That there was still some good in me. I'm 99% evil machine, 1% decent, good dad. Like, bad dad every other day of the week, every other day of the year. This one time for this one, 5-minute span, good dad. Like, you were right. There was good in me, and because Luke chose to believe in the good of his father, the good, there was an aspect of him that was still good, that something positive could come out of that, and in this case it was, he threw the Emperor off. I don't even want to say kill the Emperor, because we know
the universe is saved.
Yeah, it's a net positive. Luke believing in his dad led to a net positive, not a negative. That being said, I love the way Vader just, the stoicness and silence of that mask is just so great, especially when the Emperor is so emotive. The Emperor's I fucking love the Emperor in this movie, man. When he's sitting there and he's not just one or two steps ahead. He feels omniscient. He feels like he is so clued in. He goes, "Who do you think led to the leaks of the plan for this Death Star? You have I'm not just a couple steps ahead. I'm playing a completely different game to you guys." He feels omniscient. This otherworldly feeling of the Emperor. One, they never call him Palpatine in the film. They just always call him the Emperor. He is a figure, and he feels larger than life. And the acting behind that character, every single do it. There's every single syllable is punctuated perfectly, and it's done so well that it later becomes a joke. It's a jokey kind of, in episode 3, it's jokey. In Rise of Skywalker, it's just reminder that this should not be happening. Why did this happen? But in this film, the Emperor feels, even though he's sitting there, he has a lightsaber there. At no moment does the Emperor not feel like he's in control until Luke tells him, throws away his weapon and says, "No, You failed, Emperor. You failed, Your Majesty. I'm a Jedi, like my father before me. And in that moment,
great line, yeah.
like the you can just see the like. And I'm going to say this: it's another. Well, there's another line out there in another medium in another franchise that has such a punctuating moment like that, and it's what's another 17 years, just, and now you will die, and just this I'm stuck with my hobbled, crippled, apprentice instead of you. Fine, just that there's that utter it's not that he's not just angry, he's also incredibly disappointed.
I mean, I think you're putting a lot of extra stuff on there that you've thought about over many years.
Sure, you betcha, you 100% betcha. But that's what this show is for, so I can talk about that aspect of it.
We can move on from this, but
but I agree with you that Vader's redemptive stuff though has problems, serious problems when people look at it that way.
Yeah, I'm looking here at an official Star Wars video that was uploaded to YouTube and to their official site on October 30th, 2012, titled "Star Wars: The Rise, Fall, and Redemption of Anakin Skywalker." So.
Boo.
They clearly think that he's redeemed.
They do.
And again,
they do.
Like whether or not he's redeemed in the larger context of the universe or even in our conversations around it, Lucas films it as though he's being redeemed. And he is being presented as though this character is being redeemed. And so that just doesn't sit well with me watching it here in 2021, especially after fucking Trump and the monstrosities that that and that whole administration kind of did, and then just fucking nobody punished for it. So I'm bringing in a lot of the rest of the world and life experience into that at this point, and it just leaves me angry. So not the best of tastes to leave in my mouth there. So fortunately we go back to Ewoks dancing and singing and well, not singing in this one, but you can always go out and find your yub nubs.
Did I stop the film and turn on yub nub at that point? You better believe I did.
Yeah.
I went on break just to turn on yub nub.
There you go. So any other favorite moments or highlights people want to give some love to? Logan, anything from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you actually touched on it already. It's just, I like the fact that this movie is so galactic, right? It is so alien. It is so weird. It took the Mos Eisley Cantina scene and was like, what if we turned it up to 11? And I think we'll kind of get into this a little bit, I'm sure, next week and the kind of weeks to come. The prequel trilogy probably has a higher per capita alien to human ratio than the original trilogy does, but it never feels as
practical.
Weird.
None of them are real.
Yeah, but it never feels as weird and as a part of the world as in Return of the Jedi and A New Hope in particular. They feel lived in. There they feel like they are just a part of this world that you're just kind of getting this glimpse of, right? Jabba's palace isn't my favorite scene in the movie, but I know Brian Altano, who also loves Return of the Jedi, it's his favorite Star Wars movie. He loves Jabba's palace because it is so fucking nuts and weird and bizarre and strange and alien, and the prequels never really captured that mood again, right? I think 16 years is a long time. We'll get into this next week for sure. And George Lucas changed. I think the world changed. Obviously, filmmaking changed, cinema changed. And I think he drew a lot of lessons from the original trilogy and put them in the prequels that weren't actually the right lessons to take, which again, I would argue was the same thing that happened whenever the sequels were made, right? They took the wrong lessons from Star Wars and making the sequels. These movies are very special. They're hard to replicate, clearly. But I think just the strangeness of Return of the Jedi, I always loved. I like the fact that at the final act, it does feel like you are kind of having all of these kind of seemingly random forces all coming together to give one last final push against the Empire. It really just feel like you're getting like kind of this motley crew together on a truly like galactic scale, even more than in A New Hope. And then a big thing that we haven't talked too much about is the fact that like I love that this is a very Luke movie. Right, like I feel like he's obviously the main character in the trilogy, but I feel like in each movie he's kind of taken on a larger role, right? Like in 4 it's him, but also Han and Leia have pretty big roles too. And Obi-Wan is like the co-main character for like part of it as well, and it's like it's very muddled. Then 5 he kind of takes on a more of a center stage, and 6 is like this is Luke's movie. And so I love that, right? Like I love Mark Hamill, I love Luke Skywalker. He's my favorite character, and this movie is a lot of why. Like this is the Luke Skywalker I think of whenever I close my eyes and kind of dream about this character. And then yeah, I mean it is the final act of the movie, right? Like Gary Whitta has talked about how like his favorite thing from Star Wars is the last act, just like me. And I think you see that a lot in whenever we get to Rogue One and the very clear inspirations that are taken from Return of the Jedi in that movie, right? Yeah, like I think it's just, is the movie flawed? Is the movie actually perfect? I don't know. Is anything actually perfect? But certainly I'll say that for me and what I want from a Star Wars movie, right? Like the 2 hours and 11 minutes of Return of the Jedi are perfect for me. They do everything I would want from what this movie should have been. And the final act is just kind of the culmination of that, right? Like one thing we haven't really talked too much about because I don't really want to get into the argument and conversation around it is the fact that like the ending and people being like, well, that doesn't really solve the larger problem of the Empire. To me, that is a conversation that always completely missed the point. The Empire lost, Empire falls apart, the Empire dies, the Emperor, the good guys win, right? Like that's the point. And the larger conversation around that, I never really made any sense to me. It's always like, well, you're just trying to like fill in a thing beyond that. And in that context, I think no movie I've maybe ever watched in my entire life has been made worse by the movies that followed it than Return of the Jedi, which have just continued. Like every Star Wars movie from episode 1 to episode 9 has just sought to like untie all of the knots that were tied and all the loose ends that were finished off in this movie and just undo them. And it's been to my eternal frustration, nowhere more so than in episode 8 and 9, which just were like, what if we just didn't that movie's ending? And I was like, I really liked that movie's ending though. And episode 9 in particular, right? Like, I think it's unfortunate, but it doesn't diminish the movie itself. And I think it is such a, I think, well done realization of how Star Wars should end, right? Like to me, like this is just like, this is the canon ending, and then with the sequels, and they like did their own shit, and it's like just them doing 3 other movies that are like are canon, but like different canon 2.0, because it's mad messy and we don't need it. But yeah, like Return of the Jedi is such a perfect ending to like it's actually one of my favorite endings to any like series of like film or TV or books or anything. And so yeah, I've always really loved Return of the Jedi. Obviously, I mentioned it when we begin the series. It is my favorite Star Wars movie. It is easily one of my 3 or 4 favorite movies of all time. I just think that it has such a sense of cool to it. It has such a sense of wonder to it. It's got such a sense of kind of this bizarre, weird alien magic to it. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. Like when I watched it last year, I definitely like had tears coming down at certain points. The last act is just, I think it's just a really well done thing. And like for all of, I think the gimmickiness and flaws and poorly acted nature and poorly written nature and poorly directed nature of Star Wars, down the line, these first 3 movies are really, really good, and 40 years later they remain really good, and Return of the Jedi is just kind of the last great exclamation point on that, is what I'll say.
It's very fascinating because I saw you were done talking like a good 3 or 4 seconds before I stopped hearing you talk. So it's definitely audio sync is not going to be good on the video version of this one, but we'll make do. But I just wanted to real quick before I throw to you, Frank, because I want your thoughts next. I like, it's weird because I never, like, until hearing about the extended canon of like the Thrawn trilogy and stuff like that, I never
Yeah.
would have thought like, oh well, this doesn't solve the ending, like this does,
100%.
because especially when you put it in the context of like this being a metaphor or for like basically World War II, and it's like
Yeah.
yes, Nazism clearly has not ended, but like it pretty much like had a pretty significant death blow when Hitler was no longer
Yeah.
around. So like
Yeah.
you could pretty easily just kind of put that into the galactic politics of Empire Strikes Back. If anything, I think,
Which is exactly what I did as a kid. Yeah.
yeah, like if anything, like I would have had that same thought at the end of A New Hope of like they clearly blew up this giant thing that has to cripple, and then they come back with Empire Strikes Back, and it's like, yes, it was a blow, but then immediately the Empire, struck back or something like that. Well, obviously, but even in the the opening crawl, before the movie happens, they talk about the Empire having a retaliatory strike, and so like this, yes, they're just blowing up another Death Star, so. Like, I suppose you could have the argument of like, well, what's to stop a third Death Star from being out there somewhere that just isn't seen? But it is the fact that the Emperor is there, and like that is the clear figurehead of this government,
too,
and what is that going to be? And I think it would be very easy to, outside of that, tell simple stories of like the Empire sunk so much into these massive projects that have now just completely like these massive warships that are gone, that there is no faith, and the the people will rise up against that kind of thing. Like that is not a hard story to tell, and so it's
say
one I
nothing
just
of
never
the
even
human
would have
cost.
thought
There are
about.
like tens of thousands of guys on the Death Stars too. Yeah,
especially this one that's just like contractors that are still working there in in the throes of a construction job that may have been what was gonna save their family's livelihood or something like that back on Coruscant. They flew out here to Endor to just take a job, and now boom, they're dead. I always
will
joke
say that
I would always wear
those-
Imperial shirts. Sorry,
Oh, yeah.
because I was like, well, they got to have a better health program, right, than the Rebellion. So of course I want to be part of the Empire.
Sam.
Yeah.
Sam.
Sorry.
Like the like, why wouldn't I join the 501st? Like,
yeah,
protecting our galaxy from these terrorists.
Yeah. Frank, hit me with some of your or any of your favorite moments for this one.
Yeah, so I definitely love a lot of the moments in this movie, and I think we've covered a lot of them, especially just from like Jabba's palace and kind of the all the parts of the ending, including especially Luke in the throne room. But there is a specific moment I do love about that, not that moment between Luke and Darth Vader, but when they're actually dueling.
it's so good.
Like, I love at the end when it's like he kind of has beaten him and Vader's like against the railing, and when he hits him and he takes Vader's arm off, I'm just like, oh, especially because it's like, I wasn't here for the Empire conversation, but that's such a great moment in Empire when Vader takes Luke's arm. And it's especially a thing of like, Obi-Wan and Yoda told you could not handle this, and you just went right in here and fought him. And I love that it's like he gets him this time, but he takes the arm. It's like an eye for an eye, and that's just a cool moment that I always really liked. And then, but I mean, like, then of course that's kind of where he stops, which is kind of going to Logan's point earlier too, which is another great moment. But that was just another thing I think I kind of wanted to call out, because that's just like that's a moment I like, but watching it again, like that hits hard. Like that's just such a cool moment when you finally see it happen.
Yeah. One little thing I want to throw out there before I throw to you, Cam, is something I didn't think about, and I didn't put him in here, but Dennis Lawson. I also want to give a shout out to Dennis Lawson playing Wedge Antilles, because he also gets his little moment to shine. Obviously, he's been there. He's been a stalwart in the Trench Run as well as on Rogue Squadron and stuff, and so he is another person that will also eventually maybe make a reappearance or something like that, but. Like, and especially like growing up playing the Rogue Squadron games and stuff where he is, more of a character and stuff. Like, I love that he was that weird, like, continued presence throughout as instead of just miscellaneous pilots, which we see a ton of, like the fact that there was like a steady familiar face that then gets to celebrate with everybody on Endor is a lovely little moment there. And I love that in that same vein, that Lando, he's already been, like his redemption from the end of Empire, and then continued on here in Return of the Jedi, works much better for me, obviously. Because yes, while he betrayed his friends, like, you get why he did it, and he, volunteers to lead the assault on the Death Star and stuff. So like he's clearly earned his due back. And I love due back. And I love that he gets great moments there in this one. And especially again for like, a black actor at the time and stuff, getting that kind of like spotlight and getting to be a general and General Calrissian out there, and the immediate relationship that he and Lando, or that he and Han have, like, feels good as soon as they're back, and they have that wonderful moment in wait, I thought you were still blind. Yeah, no, I can see much better now. Taking the shot, and then they're back and forth, and just like they have a lot of the same like unspoken stuff that we saw in Empire between Luke and Han. And it's just kind of like, now that Luke is going off on his own journey, giving Han that kind of other energy to play off of is another fun bit. So Cam, hit me with some of your favorite stuff.
So to tag along with one of Frank's. Sorry, Frank. I kept wanting to call you Scott for some reason. Scott's like, I know plenty of Scotts, but for some reason I was just trying to call you Scott. It's been a long day. I apologize. We're at the tail end of a very long day for me. But the scene where he lops off Vader's hand. I know that this frame doesn't exist in the film, but it's never stopped me over the years from inserting it in my own mind, where when he lops off the hand, he looks at Vader's hand, looks back at his hand, and then in my mind, I always see between Vader's, like looking at Vader's hand and looking at his own hand, that frame from Empire where Vader's mask is broken off and it's Luke's face. I always see that in my mind. No matter how many times I've seen this movie, I can never get that image out of my head when I see that those that very simple sequence of frames that comes across when they do that. And it's so, there's so much about that entire moment that is just so good to me. That just feels right. The symbology is just so perfect and in sync with what it's trying to do with that. So that's one of my, I love this film top to bottom when it comes to sequences. Yeah. However, one thing I will say that's different this time watching it than the last time I watched it was when the Ewoks. I've always thought of the Ewoks kind of being like a play school, wiffle ball bats to the stormtrooper things. This time I kind of watched it with a different lens, which was I kind of in my own head put in sound effects for what the Ewoks were doing. Because there's the moment the Ewoks show up to fight the stormtroopers and they let loose their arrows, and it's like, oh, their arrows are they're stone arrows. There's a stormtrooper with an arrow in the back of his neck. Straight up, very visible, back of the neck, falls over dead. When the Ewoks charge the fallen stormtroopers and start hitting them, in my mind, I'm not hearing the music. I'm hearing the sound of clubs smashing against laminate armor and breaking it as they just murder these guys. And throughout the entire moment, and then I remembered they were trying to cook Han for dinner. What were they eating around the campfires during the celebration, I wonder? Stormtroopers.
They made a drum set out of their helmets.
Not just their helmets, Frank. Not just, in my mind, not just their helmets. They probably did that with the skulls inside of them, too.
All right.
Because that's how you get that reverberation in there.
Sure.
Anyway.
Yes, sure, Cameron. Yes.
I'm joking.
We're talking about the percussive nature of skulls.
And inside of a helmet, yeah. No, so there's that. I will say that just a massive shout out. I already said it earlier, but Leia choking out, that entire sequence of, once again, knowing each other so well that you only have to give a look, this plan being so in sync. Luke, just hands in front of him, Guy trying to shove him off looks over at Jabba and says, Jabba, this is your last chance. Surrender or die. And when Jabba chooses death, Luke just like looks over, does the nod. Lando does the nod. Luke does the salute. That entire sequence of from there and then things go off. And by the way, if I remember correctly, it's not a guard that does the Wilhelm scream. It's Boba Fett.
No, it's a guard.
Is it a guard?
Yeah.
Dang it. I thought it was Boba Fett.
Nope. No, Boba Fett just goes out like a bitch.
Unfortunately.
100%.
Yeah, because Boba Fett sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. The man who has made like the coolest character in the expanded universe novels, 100% a bitch in the films.
I don't know.
absolutely.
I think probably Frank might be the only other one who's caught up on Mandalorian stuff, but he gets some good moments in Mandalorian. So
I'm caught up on Mandalorian.
So he will eventually be more worthy of the massive adoration
Boo.
that the fan base has given him. But yes, based on these movies, no, he was a cool bit of armor and a jetpack.
I love the way he goes out though, because it's Han just bumblefucking his way through that fight. It's so good.
That whole fight's so good.
Han, who's normally I love it because Han's normally the cool hand in a fight, most accurate with it. Like the guy who normally has everything locked down to a T on how he's like dealing with things. You know, the whole thing with the he even says to Chewie, "Fly casual." That's just how Han deals with things. But the way that Han is just bumblefucking his way through the rest of this is just the absolute best. I love it. It's so great. But honestly, I think your feelings have betrayed you. If you will not turn, like there is a sister. Your sister, and I love it because at no point does Vader call her his daughter. Because at that moment, it's Luke's sister, not my daughter. This leverage is Luke's sister. And Luke, once again, when it comes to himself, never is at worried. He's never he's like, whatever decisions I make, I stand with. But when it comes to people threatening the people he cares about, that's when that's his trigger. When the Emperor says, your friends will, your faith in your friends will be your downfall. This idea of friendship and love and camaraderie that has been built over 3 films comes to a head, and the trigger that finally gets Luke to go after Vader seriously is his friends. This adopted family that he's built over these films. And it's just those moments where it's that point where it's like, Luke has always had the potential to top Vader. But now we are seeing when Luke is fighting for what he cares about, even though he's enraged, he's fighting for what he cares about, and it's still coming from a good place. He is this powerful. And also this anger, this anger inside of him that we've been told throughout the films is he could be such a great Sith because of this anger and darkness inside of him. We see that explode out of him in that moment where Darth Vader, who's been the 7-foot-tall badass of the Star Wars universe so far, just cannot keep up with Luke's ferocity. And I love it. Everything about the throne room is the best.
Yeah.
And let me rephrase that. Everything about the throne room is just so succinctly put together to be a culmination of everything we've seen so far in these 3 films. And it's great.
It's the best. It's great.
So
yeah.
those are my highlights.
One last thing I did want to give a shout out to, because Frank and Cam each kind of alluded to it or touched on it directly, is just the scene with obviously Luke cutting off Vader's hand, and the whole lightsaber scene itself is, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. I mean, that is my favorite lightsaber fight in the entire saga. It might not be the most technically brilliant, although it's actually really well done for the original trilogy, and better than some of the more outlandish ones we're going to get later on. But just how much, I think, emotion, and there's never another lightsaber duel, even with Obi-Wan and Anakin's, that feels like it has that level of raw intensity and intimacy as Luke and Vader in the throne room. I think the way it's shot is brilliant, the use of flashing lights and just darkness. It's very claustrophobic, and epic at the same time. I mean, yeah, it is my favorite lightsaber duel in the whole series. And again, the fact that it is also like the only lightsaber duel that ends with basically the winning combatant just like throwing away his lightsaber and saying, "I'm not going to finish the job." Everything about Luke's arc is great. And one other thing is just like Return of the Jedi is finally where Luke becomes cool, and he becomes really cool, and I think you get the sense of that, right? And yeah, Luke's very real flirtation with the dark side in that final moment with Vader, and then again, kind of him having to see that darkness to then reject it, and the power of that, I think is just great. Yeah, that whole lightsaber duel, pitch perfect. Trevor, what are your favorite moments?
So one of the things I thought about a lot as we were watching, or as I was watching this is like looking at the Ewoks, similar to Cameron there, through the lens of guerrilla warfare. Obviously, that's absolutely what they're doing. It is, the colonial Americans, getting the upper hand on the much superior British elite forces and stuff of the American Revolution, and all that stuff. And there was a moment as I was watching this time where I was like, it's convenient they have a lot of these traps all ready to go for these guys, because yes, to your point, yes, they can absolutely have their bow and arrows and throwing rocks and stuff like that, but having like the logs positioned to smash an ATST, and some of those other like traps that would take much longer time to set up and get configured. Like there's an element where it's like, well, it's convenient for storytelling purposes that they were already ready to go. But like, if I really want to put extra layers on that, it's like they were just waiting for that push, or waiting to be organized, or waiting for a reason.
The spark to light the flame.
I forgot to pull this in as a trivia bit, but just talking about that, one of my favorite little elements that I saw as I was researching this one is, well, it hasn't been officially confirmed. There is a fun fan theory that has been like left open that there is a blink and you'll miss it rebel that is part of Han's team that has, I believe, like, fans gave him the name, and he has been the name has been adopted as like Nick Sant or something like that, because he looks like Saint Nicholas. He looks like he's got rebel beard stuff, and in Star Wars Rebels, Captain Rex, Commander Rex, who was, if I remember correctly, Anakin's clone general who breaks away from everything and aligns with Ahsoka in a lot of the Clone Wars and Rebel stuff. Mm-hmm. By the time Rebels comes around, because he and other clones have like advanced aging, he has a beard very reminiscent of that. And so it started this fan theory of like, is that Commander Rex fighting alongside Han Solo on Endor? And it's not ever explicitly stated, but in the finale of Rebels, they do make mention that Commander Rex was at the Battle of Endor, and so like you could leave it in. It is left up to interpretation of whether or not that character is this other, has this storied lineage of it. And I just remember seeing that and then finding out this theory and being like, sometimes Star Wars is really, really cool, guys. Even these fun, weird, off the wall fan theories.
Star Wars is great, yeah.
And Dave Filoni basically came out and said like, we didn't put a firm like button on that fan theory, like because he very easily could have like shown that shot recreated in Rebels art style or something like that in that to confirm this idea, but like leaving it open-ended enough is just it's fun for speculation purposes and stuff like that. And I love that, and I love that even as well as I know these movies and as many times as I've seen these movies, I still find out new things about the fandom and the extended like lore of these things, and I just think that's really cool. So, but yeah, in the grander scheme of things, the idea, I don't remember if it was something that I've talked with Logan about over the years, or if it's just one of those like fan theory kind of conversation pieces out there, but the idea that the Emperor's downfall is not respecting other like other beings, like lesser beings, and we see that kind of like throughout a lot of the saga. We see that with the Gungans, or we will see that with the Gungans next week. We see that with the Ewoks. We like those the disdain towards the clones or whatever, like that we see that throughout as a recurring motif throughout Star Wars, that like superiority, and especially again going back to the allegory for Nazism and white supremacy and the the Aryan race and stuff like that, the Alliance having and being welcoming to those other alien forces and tech. I mean, even Nien Nunb being their co-pilot to the Millennium Falcon in the Battle of Endor, is a really cool thing that the Alliance has that we never see really on the Empire side. So
we see two admirals in this film. One is the Imperial Human Admiral, who's filled with hubris, and the other is Admiral Akbar.
Yeah.
So the homie,
the homie,
Mon Calamari, Admiral Akbar. Yeah. So I love that this movie gets weird again with Star Wars. Like especially after talking about it last week.
Hell yeah.
The fact that like it goes into so many different directions, and maybe that was for toys as much as anything else, but like still in the grand scheme of things, Star Wars got weird again, and it makes it a fun experience and a great capper to this trilogy of films. So yeah, those are my thoughts there. So let's go ahead and give our grades to it. I don't remember, Frank, since you weren't here last week, did you have a grade for Empire Strikes Back that you wanted to give?
Yeah, I would give I'll higher A, just like an A.
So that was as a recap there. Logan and Frank there gave that one an A, while myself and Cameron gave it an A+. So where do we want to sit with Return of the Jedi here? Logan, I presume this is an A+ from you.
This is my first A+. Yeah, it'll be my favorite one.
Yeah, no surprise there. Cameron, where are you at on this one?
Because the only edition that now exists is the special edition, it's an A-.
Okay. And if you had the VHS versions from growing up and stuff, what would it have been, an A?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Probably even like if you asked younger Cameron, be the A+ best thing in the world. But no, like looking at it like in respect to the other two films, it's an A. Without the added garbage. With the added garbage, it's an A-.
Yeah. Frank, how about you?
Yeah, I would think I'd go an A+ on this one as well. I really like Return of the Jedi. I mean, I like all three of them, of course, and I know we all do, but like I do really also enjoy this movie, and it's just fun, man. And I mean, well, yeah, it's a good way to end it. Like we said, it's this when you watch all three back to back, like we have, it's a really good build up and ending to all of these three. And then I think Logan had a really good point earlier when he said like, we don't really get that again, or at least like we haven't yet. Like they keep doing more, but there's not like a really good succinct ending that ties.
So I was sitting
together,
here for my own grade thinking, do I give this an A+ like I did Empire? And ultimately, I think not even as much because of the extended editions and stuff like that. Like Cameron is taking the ding on. I think really it does come down to, I don't like that they try and spin Vader as a redemption story. So it misses an A+ for me, but it still gets a solid A. So that is where I fall on it. For our Summer of Star Wars, we have been ranking the series as well, and I'm worried about this one because this might be our first tie. So Frank, since you weren't here last week, we did rank Empire Strikes Back above A New Hope last week. So what are the arguments? Obviously, Logan's argument would be that this is number one. Frank, where do you fall on this one in the ranking of the saga so far? I got to figure out if I got to pull up a random number generator to if we're gonna have a 2v2 split on this one.
Because it is tough for me, and I know it is obviously just kind of a fun ranking, anyways. But I mean, like, if since Empire is already at number one, to me, I wouldn't put this under Empire either. So like, I would probably have to agree with Logan and then say Return of the Jedi would go in at number one. And again, Empire, great movie. I don't want to come off like I don't love Empire either. It's just like this movie I thought had a lot of like great moments and a lot of hype moments and just even a lot of amazing. It's kind of one of those things we talk about almost with the MCU a little bit, where it stands a little bit higher off the backs of the other movies. Where like if this was just the only Star Wars that ever existed, it wouldn't hit as hard necessarily. But the other movies did such a good setup, like. That's where I think I probably fall
before I throw it to
Hell yeah,
Cameron for
Frank.
his take, I will
Number
give Logan, go ahead and make your case for why it should be number one.
No, I mean, I think everything Frank just said, I agree with, right? Like, I think that Return of the Jedi, I mean, it's Uncharted 4, right? Like, it builds off of everything before it so well that final payoff is so good, right? You've invested so much emotion, time, energy into it that, yeah, I mean, I think it carries so much extra weight, right? And it gets you to the end of this journey, and I think it is a completely fulfilling process and one with so much emotional weight to it, for all of the characters involved, including the central character of the series, arguably the saga, and Luke, and kind of his, at the time, kind of conclusion and finale of his kind of arc from, again, that farm boy on Tatooine to this mythological figure. Also, it's super cool.
Super cool indeed. Cameron, where would this fall in your rankings?
So, it's not number one. I'll put that right out there. We talked a lot about this last week about like, you know, our personal feelings and like the themes and what it hits on. What Return of the Jedi goes for, a lot of the times it hits. It misses a few things in regards to, like, I agree, I've never personally seen Darth Vader's redemption as an actual redemption, but with that being the way that it's framed, and that is definitely the way they're going with it officially, like, I just don't agree with that, especially after you can't say this man was the meanest, baddest man in the galaxy for 2.5 movies, and then at the very end be like, but it's okay, because like his son loves him still, and he did good. Like I said, it works better off of not a redemption metaphor but a different metaphor, but being that it is the redemption of Anakin Skywalker, like it falls flat on that end for it. There's other things I think are like the fact that the film just keeps going, like it doesn't have like a pause point. There's no point for characters to kind of like everything that anybody talks about is usually in relation to what is coming up next. There's never a moment of like characters, like there's very few moments. There's only a very few moments of characters building off of each other and like adding more to their relationship, whereas most of the film's dialogue is dedicated towards getting us to the next point of the film's plot. And in that, this is why I think that's why Empire has moments like, yeah, they're fit. Like you could have dialogue where it's just dedicated to Han and Chewie talking about fixing the ship, but instead there's all this play of Han also flirting and like trying to get with Leia, and this entire building of their relationship and dynamic. On top of it, there's multiple layers to the conversations that are going on, and during a single scene where I feel like most of the time in Jedi there really is only one layer of conversation throughout the entire film. Additionally, I don't think it's directed as well as Empire. The things that I will say it has going for it is that there are more aliens, but when it comes to like my personal tastes and my personal choices, I like, especially after reading Joseph Campbell's A Hero of a Thousand Faces, New Hope is better to me because of like what George Lucas does with Star Wars. Almost like A New Hope almost ended his love of like films in general. Like he almost like he doesn't really direct any films after that ever, because of what like the toll that it took on him. That being said, I think if we are looking at like these movies as just Star Wars films, for me it goes below Empire but above A New Hope. So
Okay, so you would put it at number 2 there.
I would put it number 2.
And so in addition to like my big, gripe there obviously of Vader's quote redemption, you touched on another point there, Cameron, in that for the first 2 movies, they were so groundbreaking in what they were doing for like special effects and technology and stuff like that, and they feel so tangible. And there's a lot of stuff in this one that I felt was a step back in production design, and a lot of that may fall onto Richard Marquand's inexperience with that, and any tension with that. But like especially in a lot of the speeder bike stuff that we didn't really touch on a ton or anything like that, but like there were a lot of moments in that sequence where I could see what it was trying to be, and it was falling flat in a lot of those moments for me. And I think like a tighter hand on that would have helped for some of that stuff. But I do think it, in contrast, I think delivers really well in the space battle stuff that we see outside in the battle around the Death Star, and the like, because this is the first time we're seeing a big space battle in the series. Obviously, like the assault on the first Death Star was 30 X-wings and Y-wings and stuff like that. So this is the first time we see the Rebels fleet against the Empire's fleet, and so that like it immediately has a much grander scale to it, and I almost wish that we'd spent more time with it, and we weren't having to split as much focus. But at the same time, like, I love what's going on the ground. I love what's going on with Luke and Vader and the Emperor. So like it's almost like I just wish there were more of all three a little bit, and we don't get it. So ultimately I think I'm with Cam in that I would put Empire above this one, but this it would also be like number 2 for me. So that makes it a 2-2 split for us, unless anybody's going to change their minds. I have the Google Dice up and ready to go, which was the arbiter of RNGesus for our epic PlayStation 4 series ranking stuff. So I'm now trying to, because obviously a dice roll will come into effect in the next film as well. So I'm gonna roll, and so we have basically 5 versus 6 for which one's going to be the number 1 spot. Do you get, like, I don't know if I can share my screen without breaking OBS. So do you guys just want to trust that I'm not going to lie about this, or do you want me?
Of course,
I trust your ability to not lie about this.
This is an arbitrary list. It's fine.
Of course, yeah.
Like,
so with Empire being 5 and Jedi being 6, I've got a 6-sided die. So we're gonna go with any odd number. So 1, 3, or 5 is going to give us Empire Strikes Back as the number 1 film, and any 2, 4, or 6 will give us Jedi. It is currently sitting on 5 from when I loaded it, so I am rolling the dice right now, and roll 2. So Return of the Jedi takes the number 1 spot.
Hey,
for
there
now.
we go. Look at that.
For now, final rankings not yet decided.
RNGesus working in the favor of Logan and Frank on that one. Congratulations.
I did just want to say,
yeah,
thank you. Like a final thing on Jedi. Just because the last people that spoke on it were the ones who were a bit more negative. As a final
who
positive
the most negative
thing,
on it? Yeah.
I would say most.
I would just want to say that. Yeah,
I mean, we all still gave it A's.
We all still loved it.
We all loved this
worst
movie.
was the second favorite. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, just because I didn't talk that much about, like, personally for me, but like just the sense of wonder of like 5 or 6-year-old Logan watching this movie was like nothing else, right? Like and like, to Cameron's point, right? Like, this is all biased in terms of like how we view these movies and when we view these movies, obviously. I'm happy that Frank loves it so much. It makes me so happy that someone who did watch it a bit later. But yeah, I mean, like, I never stood like tiny kid Logan never stood a chance in this movie. I think it is just the most like adventurous, almost like widespread one of the original trilogy that just kind of lights your imagination in terms of everything else like that. So yeah, I mean, I love the movie. Very happy it's number one. Either way, it'd be number one on my list as well. And yeah, it's a really fun ride.
Yeah,
movie.
and I mean, knowing you as I know you, like, of course this is your favorite Star Wars movie. Like, you are rampant positivity. In like, some people have like said you are positive to a fault at times. So of course,
you are 100% positive to a fault.
This movie and the, you know, the love and hope and you know, positivity behind it, and every, you know,
the entire thing,
good overcoming evil at the end. Of course, this is going to be above Empire and even A New Hope for you. So like it's knowing that this is your favorite movie is like the least surprising thing I could learn about you. And so no shocker there.
Also, it's just Luke at his best, so it's great.
There you go. So that would be the other thing. Knowing your love of the character Luke Skywalker, this of course is also going to be number one in your book on that front. So
and
Return of the Jedi,
Boba Fett.
There you go. Yes, all those things coming into play. So Return of the Jedi is our number one, then Empire Strikes Back, and then Star Wars: A New Hope. So every new movie better than the last. Will that continue next week for Phantom Menace? Tune in and find out.
Dicey, yeah, I'll say.
I'm pleased to announce that we will actually be foregoing our current cast, and I'm just going to bring on Yusuf Magid next week, and he will decide the rankings.
Here's the thing: if I can't make it, bring Yusuf on for sure.
I'm sure I can get him away from Ubisoft stuff for a random Star Wars podcast. So let us dive in then to the extra credit here. Other suggestions that Disney Plus will give you if you like this one. As we've touched on in each of these movies so far, it is pretty much the entire saga minus one movie, and subbing in The Mandalorian. And much like what we've seen with Empire last week, the recommendations on this one basically assume you've watched Empire, so Empire is the one that is not suggested here, and your suggestions are The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and then A New Hope. Extracurriculars, anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus these days?
Just Loki.
Watching some Loki?
Just Star Wars. Just Star Wars.
I too am watching Loki, and this was the first weekend, and part of it was because of E3 and everything going on, but like I didn't watch the new Bad Batch until like I think Monday. And it came out Friday. I just didn't watch because at this point the new Friday shows that I watch are Bad Batch and High School Musical, the musical, the series. And I was just like, the Bad Batch just hasn't really done much for me the last couple episodes, so I just kind of like sat on it. And it was a fine episode when I finally got around to it, but it's very much like, I'll watch it when I watch it, but I'm really loving Loki, and I forget that it's out there every Wednesday, so like I'll go to bed instead of like doing the normal thing I'd been doing in past nights where I'll stay up till midnight and I'll watch the thing and then I'll go to bed. But Loki I'm really enjoying, and it's a lot of fun. And then it's not Disney Plus, but I definitely want to give a shout out to In the Heights, which you can watch currently on HBO Max if you have that. I went and saw it in theaters again last night, so I've seen it in theaters twice, and that was just because I was like, I just want to like go see that movie again on the big screen. And I missed going to movies, so I went back to the Alamo last night after having already seen it opening night, and then I've watched it probably 3 or 4 times on HBO Max as well, because I very much love that musical, and it's a wonderful spectacle kind of thing. And so shout out to In the Heights, even though it is not a Disney Plus offering, but it is Disney Plus adjacent because obviously it shares a significant lineage with Hamilton, which we talked about extensively on this show last summer. So yeah, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you everybody for joining me to talk about Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give some love to there, Cameron?
We just put out a new episode of That Conversational Podcast. It stars myself and former staff member of That Nerdy Site, Christian Quinte, as we talk about the finale to the mobile game. What's the opposite of sensation? Like it's super, like
the super obscure one.
Yes, like the very obscure, incredible mobile game, Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, and what the implications are for the greater Kingdom Hearts universe as a whole. So
cool. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give some love to there, Frank?
Yeah, just want to give a quick shout out to our other podcast, That Nerdy Sideshow. This week's episode is you and me catching up on and just kind of reacting to everything that happened at E3. And then there's also some more In the Heights reactions on there if people are kind of curious about that.
There you go. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give some love to, Logan?
I'll give a love to Return of the Jedi first and foremost, and to the magic gods that let it be number one. And then I'll give a shout out to myself and Trevor's Let's Play of Operation Tango. It's been a lot of fun. I assume we'll do some more recordings of that this weekend. That game is really neat. I really do like it a lot. I will also give a shout out to In the Heights. I haven't seen it yet because we're doing a big, there's going to be like 6 of us, viewing of it this upcoming weekend. So I'll be watching it then. I'm very, very excited for In the Heights. So give a shout out to that. And then, I give a shout out to Trevor and Frank's discussion of E3, In the Heights, and everything over at That Nerdy Site show. And I'll also give a shout out and some love to Cam and Christian talking about anything because I love both those very good boys.
Oh, thank you. Also, a quick shout out also to me for winning E3 this year.
I was just going to lead into that.
Congrats.
You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and this week's That News You Care About, Logan wasn't able to make it, so it was just me and Cameron. I've talked about E3 a ton this week, because in addition to That Nerdy Site show where I spoke about it with Frank, I then kind of gave updated impressions with Cameron on That News You Care About, where we also tabulated our E3 predictions results, and it basically came down to both Logan and Cameron landed at like a point each. But the fact that Logan also lost a side bet regarding the Rabbids is what gave Cameron the tiebreaker for that one. So because I'm getting some free food from Logan, Frank's gonna get some free food from me from some side bets, and Cameron had the ultimate redemption. Take that, Anakin Skywalker. Cameron, who lost a point from last year's predictions competition, and had a negative point last year, came back for the win this year. As we touch on in that episode,
last year with the negative point, I still got more points last year than I did this year.
I don't know if you actually did, because we only did a 4-point thing last year compared to the 5 possibilities this year. But we also talked about the idea that, like, if I hadn't split up and been like, the smarmy jerk, like my Xbox prediction alone was like 4 or 5 predictions correct in one, but they were all rolled into one prediction, so it ended up being like 0.8, I think, is what we ended up giving me. So I did not take it, but oh well. It was a fun, dumb stuff in our predictions contest. So go check that out, as well as all of our other podcasts, as well as the Let's Plays that went up this week on the channel were me playing a lot of Final Fantasy VII Remake, both the intergrade upgrade on PS5, as well as the first hour of the intermission DLC, the Yuffie DLC. You can go see that on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. Okay, all those plugs out of the way. Just go see everything that we do, because it's fun. If you liked what you heard, once again, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, class dismissed, and may the Force be with you.